Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a place that is so much more than just a shape on a map. We're talking about Chad. It's a nation that really serves as a mirror for some of the biggest, most complex challenges our world faces today. It's this incredibly fascinating intersection of wildly diverse physical geography, super rich ancient history, and a very modern struggle for survival. Basically, it's a country defined by absolute extremes. Right off the bat, our sources describe the country with a phrase that is just hard to forget. They say, with an ancient history traceable for about 3,000 years, Chad is a museum of Africa. I absolutely love how perfectly that captures the essence of the nation. I mean, it highlights this deep, sprawling history and an immense cultural diversity that you very rarely find packed inside a single modern border. Okay, here's our roadmap for today. We're going to start with the crossroads of Africa. Then we'll look at kingdoms and colonies. Next up is independence and civil war. Then we'll unpack the oil wealth paradox. And finally, we'll look at a shrinking future. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The Crossroads of Africa. To really grasp Chad, you have to wrap your head around its massive scale and its amazingly diverse physical geography. Our sources actually describe what's often called the three Chads. Think of this as a geographic rule of three. Up in the north, you've got a vast, hot, totally arid Saharan desert. But move to the center and you enter the Sahelian belt, this semi-arid transitional zone. Keep heading south, and the environment transforms completely into a wetter, tropical, forested region. And because of these wildly distinct zones, Chad is actually home to an astonishing 140 distinct ethnic groups. And this brilliantly illustrates how those geographical differences directly shaped two very distinct ways of life. In the arid north, the environment historically supported Arab Muslim populations who basically lived as nomadic pastoralists, constantly moving with their herds. Meanwhile, down in the much wetter south, the climate allowed Christian and animist communities to establish these deeply rooted subsistence farming lifestyles. We're literally talking about two completely different worlds packed into one single nation. But there was this vital meeting point, the Lake Chad Basin. This massive inland body of water was historically the geographic and cultural intersection where the Saharan and intertropical features and the peoples actually came together. For centuries, this basin was the vital hub that allowed these diverse, distinct cultures to interact, trade, and, well, sometimes clash. Section 2. Kingdoms and Colonies. So who actually ruled these distinct zones before the modern borders were arbitrarily drawn? Let's take a look. If we shift our timeline back, for centuries, this region was dominated by several autonomous, often warring kingdoms. Take the powerful Kanem Empire, for instance, which completely dominated the area around the 14th century, controlling those super vital trans-Saharan trade routes. But this long-established era of indigenous empires was abruptly interrupted in the 1890s when French subjugation began. And that lasted all the way until Chad finally gained independence in 1960. Now, the sources note that the French ruled kind of half-heartedly. Their whole colonial strategy was heavily extractive. They basically viewed Chad as a massive source of raw materials and unskilled labor. They severely neglected national infrastructure, building almost no roads in a country of this immense size. And crucially, they concentrated almost all their limited investments and administrative focus down in the agricultural south. That completely isolated the northern desert regions and, as you'll see, set a very dangerous stage for future fragmentation. Section 3. Independence and Civil War. That brings us right to 1960, the year of independence. Unfortunately, instead of a fresh start, those deeply embedded colonial and geographic divisions we just talked about totally fractured the new country. At independence, a Southern-dominated government took power, effectively marginalizing the northern populations right out of the gate. The friction was immediate. By 1965, a northern rebellion group called Frolnot launched an uprising, which basically plunged the newly independent nation into a brutal civil war. And as that conflict dragged all the way into the 1980s, things got infinitely more complicated. Chad essentially became this chaotic battleground for foreign proxy wars. You had Libya backing the northern rebels, and they even invaded Chad's northern territory. Then you had France launching military operations to support the Chadian government. Meanwhile, the United States was also providing aid to the government, primarily just as a countermeasure against Libyan influence. This extensive foreign involvement absolutely prolonged the bloodshed and fundamentally delayed any real chance of national development for decades. Section 4. The Oil Wealth Paradox. Now, what's really interesting about this next slide is how a staggering economic contradiction totally flipped the script on Chad's trajectory in the modern era. $45 billion. Let that sink in. According to the sources, this is the projected value of oil revenues and related projects injected into Chad's economy since commercial production kicked off in 2003. Obviously, this is an astronomical sum of money for a developing nation.
Which naturally begs the ultimate question. Where exactly did all that money go? How on earth can a country receive tens of billions of dollars in oil wealth over 2 decades, yet still remain sitting at the very bottom of the Global Human Development Index?
Well, the answer lies in the total collapse of a really well-intentioned plan. The World Bank initially backed the massive oil project under a very strict condition, formalized as Chad's Law 001, which mandated that the oil wealth had to be used specifically to battle poverty and build infrastructure. But the framework entirely failed. Instead of funding education and healthcare, massive amounts of these funds were lost to entrenched corruption and, sadly, diverted into military arms purchases by the political elite.
And the tragic result of this failure is just stark. Despite this massive, historic oil boom, 72% of Chad's workforce today still relies entirely on traditional agriculture, livestock, and rural subsistence farming. The oil wealth completely bypassed the everyday citizens. It left the vast majority of the population just as economically vulnerable as they were before the very first barrel was ever pumped.
Section 5. A shrinking future. Today, Chad faces a looming existential threat that honestly transcends all of its political and economic conflicts. Let's talk about the environment.
Take a look at this, because the contrast is deeply jarring. Historically, Lake Chad was this massive body of water spanning 25,000 square kilometers, what scientists actually refer to as Mega Chad. Today, it has shrunk down to just 1,500 square kilometers, effectively becoming a micro Chad. What was once a thriving regional breadbasket, a literal lifeline for millions of people, is rapidly turning into what researchers with tragic irony describe as a blissful desert.
And the climate data behind this collapse is brutal. Over recent decades, the region has experienced a consistent temperature rise of 2.65 degrees Celsius. When you combine that with a significant decrease in rainfall and an evaporation rate that now exceeds 9,000 millimeters annually, well, you have a perfect recipe for environmental collapse. And remember, these aren't just statistics on a chart. These shifts threaten the literal day-to-day survival of the millions of farmers and pastoralists we've been talking about. So the crucial takeaway here is this. The shrinking of Lake Chad is way more than just a localized environmental disaster. It actually serves as a really powerful, tragic metaphor for the entire nation. Just as the waters physically recede and disappear, so too does the economic and political stability of the country, leaving its people totally exposed and vulnerable. Which leaves us with a final, pretty provocative thought to consider. As its life-giving lake literally shrinks into the desert and its immense oil wealth continues to completely evade the people who need it the most, can this incredible museum of Africa survive the massive paradox of its own geography and history? It's a profound question about resilience, and one that the whole world should definitely be paying close attention to. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the world around you.